and welcome to another edition of the African Transformation Spotlight. Today, I have with me a dynamic young lady that we've been dying to speak to. Bogolo Kenewendo is the former Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry in Botswana. She is a non-resident fellow with the Center for Global Development. She's a youth leader and an advocate. She's also founder and managing director at Kenewendo Advisory. And best of all, she's the newest addition to our board here at ACET. Moholo, welcome to this edition of the African Transformation Spotlight. We're so excited to finally have you on.
Thank you, Belinda. I'm very excited to finally be doing this interview, but I'm particularly excited to be joining the board of directors for ACET.
Excellent. Actually, and that was going to be my first question. Being the newest board member, and I think maybe the youngest too. What are some of the things that you expect to be focusing on as member of the board of assets?
Well, the youngest piece is particularly interesting for me every time it's brought up because I think. At this point, perhaps we should have younger people than me. I am this year transitioning from being a young person to a young adult, maybe. And but my responsibilities in joining the board, or my hope for joining the board, is particularly to help steer ACET to deal with future issues, to position itself to provide solutions and to provide a more long-term vision for what the Africa that we want looks like and how to get there. And I am hoping to also bring a side that focuses on gender and on youth empowerment because those are particularly important to me. And in with a focus on gender and youth, it's all about providing economic agency and making sure that in the transformation of African economies that we are focusing on providing economic agency to those that have been previously left out of mainstream economy and those that have been vulnerable.
Awesome. And actually, Asset is doing a lot of work in some of these areas with our youth employment and skills program. So it's really exciting that you're going to be pushing this agenda further. But let me ask you, you've been a minister of state before, you've worked in various circles, and in a position like yours, I'm sure you're bombarded with a lot of information from left, right, center, and all of that. What do you think is the role of an institution like Assets, in really cutting through the noise and providing information to policymakers that are, succinct, straight to the point that they can actually take up and then use and implement in their policy making?
Belinda, I think you have actually answered your own question. The issue is all about cutting through the noise and positioning ASET as the first and foremost think tank that is able to help policymakers think much more. Succinctly about what transformation looks like and about what an inclusive development would look like. And as you said, there is so much information all around, but I must highlight that a lot of the information that is available in the international space usually just lumps up Africa as one. And there is an opportunity for ASET to really start dissecting what Africa is and really prove that Africa as a continent and African countries are not homogeneous, and there are different opportunities and challenges that are country specific, that are regional specific, and hopefully ASET can help to cascade some of those international positions into much more locally based positions. And this is about, and it goes both ways. It's about taking Africa to the world and then bringing the world to Africa. So providing some local based solutions in a global context.
Right, right, right. That's interesting. Do you have any specific ideas on how we can do this? I mean, for instance, we produce a lot of research products, a lot of, policy recommendations. Is there, assuming that you were still Minister of Trade, how would you like to receive information from an institution like ACET?
So, for when I was a minister, and what I still prefer are very practical tools, detailed, not even in 20-page forms, but in a very succinct page, because, as you know, policymakers do not even have the time to go through a gazillion papers. So, is to have very succinct implementables in a summary form, and leading to the provision of a more detailed report. But for example, if we're looking at how we provide, how we create a de-risking doing business environment, then you are very detailed. We are going to start focusing on the digital side, and this is what needs to happen in order to de-risk digitization in Africa. And when we get to SME promotion, this is what really needs to happen in this particular space, looking at the current stature of SMEs in your particular country. And what I think is particularly important is to also give solutions or positioning a paper for the country that you are aiming or aspiring to have, instead of always just looking at our feet of what it is right now that is a challenge, but thinking much more in the future, because that is what real transformation is about, dealing with the issues of today, but also dealing much more preemptively on the issues of tomorrow.
Absolutely, spot on. So that actually brings me to my next question. Now, as Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry, one of your feats was that you were able to cut down the time that it took to start a business in Botswana from 49 days to 7 days. I tell you, that's an impressive feat. How did you do it, really?
Well, teamwork makes the dream work. But it was really about focusing on reforms, doing business reforms, and working on on our digital capabilities. And so we moved a lot of our registrations online, and we managed to really to streamline some of those requirements. We found that some of them were really duplicating issues, and we could just deal without the many forms that were needed. And I was hoping, by the way, that by the end of the reform process that we were going through, that even a license could have been obtained online, because we were starting to work on that. The idea was to move a lot of the government services online and make it easy for people first to know what it is that is needed, but secondly, to be able to access what is needed and the tips of their fingers, and be able to apply and get a response quite immediately. And I believe that over and above just on a digital platform, it was having a team that understood that as a government ministry, we needed to position ourselves and to reflect our constituencies. And our constituency is private sector, doesn't have time to wait around and wait 49 days in order to register a business. And so we were positioning ourselves in order to reflect the constituents that we were dealing with.
Right. And assets has quite recently introduced the private sector development program, a unit. And among some of the things that we've been doing is supporting startups and SMEs to really become investment ready. And if you look at the situation in a lot of our countries, something like this is really key. If young people want to start business, or business wants to come to countries and do business, the time and the cost involved in setting up these institutions or businesses is really important, and it seems to be a challenge across a lot of our countries. So what do you think other countries can really learn from what you did in Botswana? And I'm curious also to know what is the state now since you left the position. Is it something that has been built on, and what can we learn from that process?
Well, to respond to your first question, to your last question, all of the reforms that we made were also cleared by law. So basically, in order to reverse any of the reforms, you had to go back to Parliament. And so the majority of them I implemented, and we were able to tie in the online business registration system, for example, with some of the KYC requirements via FIA and so forth. So it would be very difficult to say that we are no longer implementing this. So it's fully functional at the moment. And just to be clear, this was only one part of a broader ecosystem that we were to work on, and one that I hope is still out in play. Because what you want as a policymaker and as a regulator is to create an enabling environment. But what are you enabling for? That was the next questions we were asking. So we had an SME development, but with what intent? With the intent that it exports, with the intent that it attracts more investment in order to expand, to deal with local productive capacities, in order to export, in order to deal with our balance uh, BOTs and so forth. So the way we would envision it is domestically, what do we need to do in order to enable just basic setup of businesses. And once we're done with that, then what do we need to do in order to encourage and attract and stimulate investment into this space? And once we've done that, then how do we stimulate more investment in order to have our businesses be exporters? So it is all about creating that pipeline. And when you start to think about the pipeline, you see just how the connectivity between these issues, that you cannot deal with export development without looking at SME development. And you can't just think solely about SME development without thinking about agricultural. So those interconnectiveness of issues, they really helped to expand our thinking. And we ended up working on this on this purposive apex model that was to help us work through the entire pipeline as we had described it. I haven't talked about the purposive apex model in a while, so this is giving me a bit of a throwback. But I truly believed that working on a pipeline, as I have described it, would really bring transformation to the development of Botswana, and I to the development of Botswana's economy. And I believe that this kind of a model, with a lot more intentionality and having finance backing up these ambitions of a pipeline, they could truly transform even diversification ambitions of any country.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's stay a little bit on trade. And the AFCFTA is a big thing in Africa now, which we see to be very promising for African countries to be able to really, boost their trade and move away from, being dependent on imports and all of that. What are some of the pitfalls really that you see with the implementation of the AFCFTA that we should keep an eye on? And what big opportunities for African countries do you see with the implementation of the AFCFTA?
Can I tell you, Belinda, I want us to flip that question around. I'm a strong proponent for the AFCFTA, and I like to start with the opportunities instead of talking about what the pitfalls could
Right.
be. And and my thing is, first and foremost, the AFCFTA is a people's project, and we all need to own it. We all need to play a part in it, and we shouldn't point fingers that the policymakers are doing this or the secretariat is doing that. But we should all really rally behind its implementation and start to ask ourselves in our own pockets, whether you're a small trader, you're a multinational, of how you can tap into the next country's market, and where you have issues, then come back to your national government to ask for facilitation. That is truly how we will start to build on the implementation of the AFCFTA. And that brings me to, the opportunities are really vast in the continent. If we implement fully the AFCFTA, we know that this is going to be the largest trading bloc in the world. And we know the opportunities that exist in having the European community trade amongst themselves. Right now, they're sitting at 86% or more of intra-European trade, and we see the benefits. Everyone is fighting to be part of the EU and the trading bloc. And similarly, it should be for us. We shouldn't even wait to find out what would the opportunities be. They are evident everywhere else in the world where there is a common market, there is development. And that's when we would start talking about the development of value chains, nearshoring, and we bring in to support ourselves issues of climate change. We need to develop our value chains closer to home in order to reduce the emissions that are associated. We need to trade better with each other. We need to do trade facilitation cross border and cross regionally, because then we could start to work on some of the digital opportunities. If you're able to roam between Botswana and Rwanda and West Africa, that digital connectiveness also provides a space for doing business for newer industries that we could have potentially not even thought about. So the opportunities are really endless. And the pitfalls to watch out for are, other than the negotiating track of the AFCFTA, which the technocrats and the politicians are dealing with, for us is what is happening on the trade facilitation space, on the non-tariff barrier space, and how can we ensure that while the negotiations are happening, we are also dealing with the non-tariff barriers. And non-tariff barriers means having 1,000 forms to fill in order for a product to cross a border. It means, being told that you can only apply after 5 p.m. or whatever the case is. Those are non-tariff barriers. And we need to also work on synergizing some of our standards that we have in our products to really ensure that there is a seamless flow of goods and services. And we shouldn't just focus on the goods, which I feel like at this moment, that's where we are. I know I speak at a very basic level for trade, and I know that some of your constituents and viewers might think, oh, but this doesn't sound very academic. And for me, I think it's so important that we start to bring down trade economic issues to the understanding of everyone. Whether you are an academic, whether you are a technocrat in this space, you should be able to speak fluently when it comes to the AFCFTA and issues of economic development.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. And at Asset, we're really trying to, build on this part of our communications. Not everybody is an economist or whatever, so we need to really break it down so the ordinary person can understand and really relate it to their life. So that's totally fine. We actually appreciate that. But let me move to maybe my I was going to ask. So what role do you see for young people in the AFCFTA? Africa, we all know, is becoming the largest youth young population in the world, and with the AFCFTA coming on, what really is the role for young people?
So the role for young people is to play a very catalytic role to the implementation of to the success, not even the implementation, to the success of the AFCFTA. But in order for young people to play that role, the government needs to ensure that the trade facilitation issues are dealt with. And it goes all the way from finance to the standards and so forth that really falls under even the trade facilitation agreement. And young people would be able to tap into these spaces if we give them room to do so. And it is for young people to also tap into more innovative spaces, trade spaces that do not exist now. The focus usually is on traditional exports and traditional products. And I just want to encourage young people to go beyond what we already know as products that are exportable, and to work towards the development of new areas, tapping into the green space, tapping into more digital products as Africa becomes more united, even under Smart Africa projects. The opportunities for tapping into African country markets, as sparsely as they continue to increase. And so young people must position themselves for those opportunities, must start thinking about scalability of that digital ventures if they are in those, and start thinking about the kind of technological transfer that is needed for some of these local based products, some of these indigenous knowledge and indigenous products that we have. What kind of technological injection do they need in order for them to thrive outside of their local space into more the continent and beyond?
Great. So let me go to my final question. You have been named as special advisor to the UN Climate Change High Level Champion, and we all know climate change is a big issue, particularly for Africa. And especially because this year, COP27 is happening in Africa. This is Africa's COP, right? So, in this
Yes.
role, can you tell us a little bit of what the role is for you? And then what are your priorities going into COP27?
Right. So the climate champions are really focused on mobilizing non-state actors to participate in climate action conversations and climate change negotiations. And so my role specifically for Africa is to make sure that non-state actor voices are present at the Africa COP, and to make sure that issues that are issues of global relevance and importance have an Africa lens in them, and that we are able to really share an African narrative in these issues. But most importantly, we should be able to mobilize non-state actor finance into non-state actor and otherwise projects in the continent. It is really all about creating opportunity, identifying the opportunities, creating opportunities, and mobilizing finance into those opportunities in climate action. And the way I see it is there are so many opportunities in climate action that can create a new economy for the continent. And that is all with a managed and a just transition. And this is a very key for the continent, that we talk about managed and a just transition, and the opportunities that lie there in energy, in water, in all areas of adaptation and resilience.
Right. So it's been an exciting time talking with Bogolo Kenewendo. Just as we round up, I'll give you a chance to say one thing to African youth and one thing to African governments and policymakers. What should they be doing? What should they be focusing on?
I wish I knew. So this is such a big question. This is a really big question for governments. First, for governments and policymakers, the recovery from COVID, from this economic crisis that we're currently on, really rests on the actions of government. Policy direction is very key right now, and there needs to be very deliberate and intentional policy implementation to see to it that we do not have economic scarring. And that is all about managing inflation right now. It's all about managing the production and supply of goods, providing support and an enabling environment for businesses right now is particularly key. And managing the flows of investment, I mean, both domestic and from foreign sources. This will be very key to the development and recovery of a lot of economies. And then for young people, really, I consistently say this is the time. Every time there is a crisis, there is an opportunity for us to do something new. There's an opportunity for us to have much more bolder actions and bolder positionings than we did before. And this, if we look at it carefully, there are spaces in digital transformation. Governments are a lot more open to digital transformation activities. So this is the time to be doing that. Matter of fact, I would argue that the time to do that was 2 years ago, before governments were fully prepared to deal with any digital ventures. But some are not. So it's still the right time to do so. And then secondly, this is the right time to start thinking about opportunities in the climate action space. We are talking to various partners about mobilizing finance into the continent and the kind of innovative financing tools that can be put in place in order to de-risk this space, but in order to attract more people into the space. So start looking into these opportunities. Once again, once government has figured out what the opportunities are, then the opportunities no longer exist. So always be a step ahead and populate, push for the reforms that you see necessary in order for you to be successful and to leapfrog into the next level of development.
Wonderful. Always be a step ahead. We've been talking to Bogolo Kenewendo. She's a newest addition to the board here at the African Center for Economic Transformation. We will be coming your way again next time with the African Transformation Spotlight, and we hope that you've enjoyed our conversation with Boholo. Do stay tuned to join us next time. My name is Belinda Ayamgha, and I'm Communications Manager here at ACET. Until next time.